Hey there, MRA, my Real Africanists. This is your girl, Marie Ya Jouf, the Real Africanist, and welcome to my channel, right? On my channel, we talk about African history, the state of African studies, and current African affairs, right? We talk about Africa for real, for real. So, I just wanted to talk about a topic that is pretty hot in the news cycle this week, right? And that is the topic about the African Union and the Israeli observer status, right? I just wanted to start off by saying that I am just super, super proud of the African Union for standing their ground and for standing up uh, and standing firm against Israel, right? I am proud of them for holding steadfast to their conviction on this Israeli AU observer status thingy, right? So if you haven't heard about it, let me give you a quick update. Okay, so evidently, this Israeli diplomat by the name of Sharon Barley, right? She is the deputy director of Israel's foreign ministry Africa's division, and she was escorted from the AU summit this past week. Okay, and so now Israel is furious, and of course they are up to, what they do, calling it hate mongering, calling African leaders hate filled, saying that they are driven, by hate for Israel and for Jewish people, I guess, and also saying that they are being controlled by Iran, right? I don't know what Iran has to do with it, right? But specifically, they are calling out Algeria and South Africa. Those are the two African nations that they are blaming this incident on. Although there are other African nations who were um, against Israel having observer status, right, at the AU, right? Um, I know that there has been a number of African spokespeople, including, and more specifically, South Africa's Minister of Foreign Relations, and that's Dr. Naledi Pandor, right? And she is basically saying that this Israeli diplomat, wasn't just kicked out uh, for um, for the sake of being kicked out. So basically, she is saying that it's a matter of principle, right? And that Israel is not accredited to be an AU observer, right? Their observer status is under reevaluation because of the situation between um, Israel and Palestine, right? Israel, according to AU protocol and policy, is an occupying state, right? They are occupying, unlawfully occupying Palestinian territory, okay? So until the African Union decides on the status of Israel, they are not allowed to observe the African Union's process, right? They do not have a seat as an observer, okay, and that's reasonable, right? That's practical. That reason needs no explanation or justification. But again, Israel is furious at it. You're seeing all kind of headlines in the news about how they are taking this situation very seriously. I mean, I think their exact words were, Israel looks harshly upon this incident, right? And again, like I said, of course, along with that comes the propaganda and the rhetoric, the anti-Semitic rhetoric and all of that stuff. Okay. So again, that's not surprising. Okay. But I stand with African leaders, and I give them their props for standing up, right? And taking charge of the situation, and just, like I say, standing firm and just letting people know, look, man, we run our own affairs, and we are competent in running our affairs, and what we say, goes in our country, right? And in our organizations, okay? So for me, what really just disturbs me and upsets me is how these different world leaders, right? How they approach African leadership, and how they treat African leaders like they are, children, or, basically they have these paternalistic attitudes towards Africa and African people, right? And African nations, like they know what's best for us, and that's old school, and we're tired of it, and so when uh, whenever I see African leaders standing up for themselves, and, like I say, putting their foot down, then I'm riding with African leaders. I know President Kagame has told them numerous of times in the media, look, we don't need you lecturing to us, trying to tell us what to do, especially if you consider your own record on civil liberties and on human rights. Who are you that you think that you can come to uh, African countries, or tell African leaders what to do and how to do it, right? I mean, this same problem exists in the academic sector. And that's one of the main reasons that I call myself the Real Africanist, because you have all of these white and other so-called Africanists of other ethnic groups who think that they just know what's best when it comes to the African narrative, right? That their scholarship, that their perspectives and their interpretations are the Holy Grail, right? That they are superior, that they even trumped the African narratives that are told by African people, right? Which is ridiculous, right? It's crazy. They would not accept that from African leaders, saying that they know what's best for the United States, or that they know what's best for Israel. So why do they think that we should accept that from them, right? So this whole thing, it just reminds me about another incident that took place back in 1971, okay? Richard Nixon was the president of the United States, and he was recorded having a conversation with Ronald Reagan, who was then the governor of California at the time, and he went on to be the president, right? And this is a man who not only Republican, but a lot of leaders in the United States, political leaders, they just worship this guy, and they consider him one of the best presidents. And like you say, most of people of African descent, black people, don't agree with that, right? Even sometimes it would get on my nerves when when President Obama would, mention Ronald Reagan and about different policies and his stance on different things. And, they call him the great communicator and all this old crap, right? However, we know, again, there's always more than one side to the story. And I think I can take the liberty to speak for people of African descent and other African leaders when we say that to us, Ronald Reagan was not did not benefit people of African descent, and was not on the side of people of African descent, right? But of course they're going to push that narrative because of just little things that they did. Always this whole paternalistic thing. Oh, we have to save the black community. We have to take care of them. They don't know what's best for themselves. They don't know what to do, right? They don't know the right thing to do. That's the kind of attitude he had as well, right? But anyway, in this conversation, he was overheard talking to Richard Nixon, President Nixon at the time, and they were overheard calling African delegates to the UN monkeys and cannibals, and saying all kind of disgusting things about them, right? On this recording, and they were saying these things only because the African delegates opposed the U.S. in a vote to approve Taiwan and deny China a seat at the UN Assembly, right? So because of that, they had the nerve and the audacity to sit behind these closed doors and these secret rooms, right, and talk about African people like they were basically the scum of the earth, okay? And this is not, believe me, this is not an isolated incident. This stuff happens all the time, right? These people, these leaders, right, they also believe in this inferiority and superiority concept, right? They believe that whites are superior to blacks, and I don't care who you are. I don't care what position you hold. They believe that, right? So again, I was a young girl when this happened, and I didn't know anything about it, but the tape resurfaced back in the 90s, and then it resurfaced again just recently, okay? So I was putting a blog together about Dr. King and Kwame Nkrumah, and I came across an article on this tape. So I put it in my blog, right? So I'll put the link to it in the description below, and if you are interested in reading the full article or hearing the tape, you can go and check it out, okay? And that's my blog at therealafricanist.com, therealafricanist.com, okay? And so also, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you all remember last year when most of African countries refrained from casting a vote that would condemn Russia for what the United States was calling an attack against Ukraine, or for invading Ukraine, right? Most of the African nations at that time, right, they stood neutral on the issue. But in response to that, I found out that the U.S. House of Representatives passed a piece of legislation called Countering Malign Russian Influence Activities in Africa Act, right? Countering Malign Russian Influence Activities in Africa Act, right? This piece of legislation basically penalizes African countries for doing business with Russia and with Russian affiliated companies, right? And surprisingly, what's most surprisingly is that the bill was sponsored by a black U.S. congressman named Gregory Meeks, right? He is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he is a high-ranking member of the Congressional Black Caucus, right? So I was reading an article about Mr. Meeks and the legislation, right? And according to the article, it said that Mr. Meeks was a huge promoter of bringing attention and investments to Africa over his 12 terms in Congress, right? So I don't know how true that is. I have not done any further research on that. However, I think the American investment record in Africa has been rather weak, right? As well as its relationship with Africa has been pretty one-sided, right? Sort of a dictatorship, since they like to call everybody else dictators, right? And it's ironic, very ironic to me, that the government didn't seem to be really interested in its relationship with Africa or strengthening its investments in Africa until they realized the extent of Africa's relationships with China and Russia, right? Until they realized that Africa was saying, okay, basically, we don't need your investment. We have alternatives, okay? And then at that time, that's when they seemed to become more interested. That's when they invited African leaders to come to Africa to meet with Joe Biden. And as you recall, before then, Joe Biden had met with African leaders, right? And of course, Trump didn't meet with African leaders. All he had to say about Africa was calling them asshole countries, right? If you remember what he said, okay. I know that the African leaders, pushed back on this legislation that was proposed by Mr. Meeks, right? And so, from what I understand now, the legislation has been postponed, but I believe that it's only been postponed while, American leaders sit back and observe how far African leaders are going to go with their dealings with China and Russia, okay? But what was most disappointing to me, again, about this legislation, because the legislation is not surprising, okay? But it was the language that Congressman Meek used to gather support for the legislation. I mean, his language was like, America needs to protect Africa from Russia, right? We need to protect African leaders and its citizens from Putin, this boogeyman, right? Who's going to run over these poor African leaders who, just can't take care of themselves, and they just can't help themselves, right? Putin's going to exploit them and take all of their resources, So we have to be the ones who come to their defense and protect them, right? Because we're not going to let them bully Africa, right? This kind of stuff, like America has not been proven guilty of all of the above, right? But that's a story for another day. But like I said, I just don't understand who these people think they are, right? But, well, I know who they think they are, but, time's out for that. That, like I say, that's old school, and that time is over with. Things are shifting, and I don't know if they are fully aware, or if they have fully accepted that, right? But things are changing, right? And like I said, I want to give African leaders credit for being at the forefront of that change, because that's why things are changing, because African leaders are changing, right? And I don't think we give our leaders enough credit for being able to stand up against these superpowers, or for doing the best that they can to maintain their independence and their autonomy in the face of this type of paternalistic and desire to just control Africa, right? So anyway, I have to say that I didn't know or realize that Africa and Russia, had a long history, right? And that Russia has supported different African nations like Namibia, Tanzania, and South Africa throughout recent history, right? And specifically during the Cold War, right? Russia was, along with Cuba, they were allies to African countries during this Cold War, right? And in other at other times throughout history, right? They helped supply African nations with arms to fight off these European colonizers, right? So now I understand why so many of these European colonizers are angry with African nations for siding with Russia. Okay, so again, like I always say, there's more to the story, right? So a lot of times I know we talk about African relations with these different European countries um, in recent terms, right? Like in today's term. But actually, these relationships go further back than, I mean, we know, right? I don't know if you all remember when our hero Nelson Mandela set the American broadcaster Ted Koppel straight in an interview that he did when he was attempting to chastise African or criticize African nations for their relationship with Fidel Castro and Cuba. And may our brother Fidel Castro and Che Guevara continue to rest with the ancestors, right? And Nelson Mandela set them straight, basically saying that, you know, the West, y'all talk a good game, but these are the people who actually assisted us, right? They had boots on the ground. You know, they gave us what we needed to fight against our oppressors, right? And so, again, I just wanted to say big ups to congratulations, big ups, right? Whatever we want to call it, to the African leaders for standing their grounds, right? And also, a friend of mine, he sent me a link to the YouTube video about the history of Africa and Russia, and I will also put that link down in the description if you want to take a look at that. You know, it's a very interesting and very powerful video. Like I said, you know, I never knew anything about that, and so I was very pleased to learn about that relationship, because, you know, a lot of times, again, we form perspectives based upon what we think we know, but really we just don't know the whole story, right? And so these platforms have really opened the world up and have opened us up to being able to learn more about our history, right? And that's why it's important. I mean, it's good that we have YouTube as a platform, but it's also necessary and important that we build our own independent platforms, right? Our own independent processes, our own independent products that teach our people about our history and about what's happening in Africa today, right? And that's what I do through my aspect model, and that's the African system of progressive education and communication techniques, right? And if you want to learn more about the aspect model and what I do, you can go to my blog at the realafricanist.com and find out what services I offer and if I can be of service to you. Okay. So anyway, I'm signing off, right? I want to say happy Black History Month, day 22. I don't want to forget that, right? And also to remind you to never forget the ancestors, never forget the accomplishments and the sacrifices of those that came before us and paved the way for us to be sitting here doing what we are doing today, right? Even sitting here communicating with one another. Somebody paid an ultimate price for that, and we cannot forget that, right? So I also want to just encourage you to continue to support this Change the African Narrative, all the YouTubers and social influencers that are out here bringing value and telling you the African story from the African perspective. I would like to encourage you to support them, you know, hit the like button, subscribe to their channels, right? Comment and engage with them about the topics that they are talking about, right? I am glad that you are here, but for me, we are all in this together, right? It's more than it's not just about me. It's more than that, right? It is a momentum. It is a movement that is going on, and we have to keep it going. So even if you are not a YouTuber or a social influencer, right? Even if you are not in a formal capacity where you teach about Africa or that you are able to reach a mass audience, right? Do what you can where you are to help keep this movement going, right? That may be just talking to your family members, your friends, about the real deal, right? Trying to educate them on the African perspective, right? Or trying to uh, um, teach them about the importance of knowing their history, right? And knowing the African story from the African perspective. So again, thank you for being here. Remember to fight the power, right? And also remember that freedom is not free, right? And that there is always more to the story, okay, than meets the eye. So peace, have a good day, and I will see you next time.